I built a company from nothing. My name is Jason, I'm 34 years old, and I started a small logistics business with a dream: to make it big, to create something that would last. At first it was just me, working long hours, making calls, chasing clients, figuring out every detail on my own. I didn't have much, but I had determination. Slowly things began to pick up. I found a few loyal customers, hired a small team, and bit by bit, the business grew. There were days when I doubted everything, when the bills piled up and the paychecks were late. But I kept pushing because I believed in what I was building. I was proud of what I'd created. And after months of relentless work, the company finally hit its first big milestone. We crossed $1 million in revenue. It felt like proof that all those sleepless nights were worth it. With growth came the need for help. I needed someone I could trust to manage the finances, someone who could handle the numbers while I focused on expanding the business. That's when I met Mark. We clicked instantly. Mark was confident, sharp, and had experience with money management. He promised to take care of the financial side, and I believed him without hesitation. Trusting Mark with the company's money felt natural. I thought this was the moment we would take the business to the next level together. I never imagined that trust would cost me everything, but at that point I had no reason to doubt. We were partners. We shared a vision. I was ready to leave the financial worries in his hands and focus on growth, never expecting that this decision would be the beginning of the nightmare that followed. When I first met Mark, I thought I had found the perfect partner. We were both in our early 30s, hungry to build something real. I had the drive and the vision, and Mark said he had the skills to handle the money side of things. It seemed like the perfect match. I was relieved to finally have someone I could trust to keep the finances in check, someone who would share the weight of running the business. At first, everything felt smooth. Mark handled the books, paid the bills, and managed payroll. I focused on landing new clients and growing our logistics network. I trusted him completely because he seemed confident, knowledgeable, and careful. I wasn't the best with numbers, and I knew that. It felt right to let him take the lead in that area. We split the roles clearly. I ran operations, met with customers, and made decisions about where to expand. Mark promised to keep the finances tight, to watch our cash flow, and to make sure the company stayed healthy. We talked about trust, about being transparent with each other, and about building a future together. I didn't question it when he said the accounts were balanced or that expenses were under control. I believed him when he reassured me everything was fine. I thought we were in this together, that our partnership was solid. I never imagined that behind the scenes things were already starting to go wrong. I was ready to focus on growth, thinking the money side was handled, but I had no idea that trust was about to be broken in the worst way possible. As the business grew, I started to lean more and more on Mark. Every new contract, every bigger shipment, I trusted that the money was being managed properly. I wasn't a financial expert, but I believed Mark was. I told myself that with him handling the numbers, I could focus on what I did best: building relationships, finding new clients, and expanding our reach. We celebrated small victories like landing bigger deals and increasing our delivery fleet. It felt like everything was coming together. Mark seemed busier too, always working late, talking about budgets and projections I didn't fully understand. I never questioned it. I thought that was part of growing up in business. I remember feeling proud when people started recognizing our name. We had moved from a small operation to a real company with a future. I was excited to keep pushing forward, confident that we were on the right path. I believed Mark was steering the financial side wisely. It felt like our partnership was unstoppable. But somewhere along the way, something changed. I started to notice small things: missed calls from suppliers, bills that didn't get paid on time, questions about expenses I didn't have answers for. I brushed it off, telling myself that it was just the growing pains of a new business. I thought Mark had it under control and that these hiccups were temporary. I had no idea that behind those numbers and promises, the foundation of everything I had built was beginning to crumble. I was about to learn the hard way that trust in business can be the most fragile thing of all. Then the first signs of trouble started showing up, small things at first. I began getting calls from suppliers asking why their invoices weren't paid. At first I thought it was just a delay, maybe Mark was busy or something got mixed up. But then the calls didn't stop. More bills were overdue. I started noticing that some payments we expected weren't clearing, and the bank statements didn't quite match what I was being told. I tried to ask Mark about it, but every time I brought it up, he had an excuse ready. He said cash flow was tight but under control. He promised it would all sort itself out soon. I wanted to believe him because honestly, I didn't have any other choice. I had built this company from the ground up and I trusted him not to ruin it. But inside, a knot was growing. Something didn't feel right, and I couldn't shake it. I started going over the numbers myself, trying to understand where the money was going. But I didn't have the training, and Mark had always been the one with access to everything. When I asked for documents or reports, I was met with vague answers or delays. The unease kept growing as I saw how tight things were becoming. I felt like I was losing control, and worse, I was powerless to stop it. That's when the calls from debt collectors began. At first, I thought it was a mistake. How could we owe money we didn't know about? I was terrified. What was happening to my company? What was happening to me? One morning, I woke up to my phone ringing nonstop. It was debt collectors. I couldn't believe it. How did we get here? I kept asking myself the same question over and over. I answered the calls, trying to stay calm, but inside, I was shaking. They told me we owed thousands, money I didn't even know about. I was stunned. I had no idea our accounts were in this state. I called Mark immediately, demanding answers. He sounded calm, almost too calm. He told me not to worry, that it was just a misunderstanding, that he was handling it. But the fear in my gut told me otherwise. How could this happen without me knowing? I felt blindsided, like the ground was shifting beneath me. It wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal. The fact that someone I trusted so much could let everything fall apart, or worse, do something to cause it. I kept asking myself, how did I miss the signs? How did I not see this coming? I started to realize that the person I counted on to protect our business was the one who put it all at risk. The calls kept coming. The pressure was unbearable. I was drowning in confusion and panic. It felt like my whole world was collapsing and I didn't know how to stop it. I was scared, angry, and lost, unsure of what the next step should be. All I knew was that things were about to get much worse before they got better. When I finally got access to the accounts, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. Our company's bank balance wasn't just low, it was nearly empty. Thousands of dollars were gone, drained without any explanation. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Money that should have been there to pay suppliers, employees, and bills was just gone. I confronted Mark, hoping there was some mistake, some explanation I hadn't thought of. But he avoided my questions, changed the subject, and eventually started blaming me. He said I was careless, that I hadn't given him the support he needed, that it was my fault the company was failing. Hearing that from someone I trusted so deeply was devastating. I kept going over the numbers, trying to find any clue, any sign that could explain what happened. But it was clear. This wasn't just poor management. This felt like something worse. It was like the foundation of everything I built was being pulled out from under me. I remember the sinking feeling in my chest, the frustration and fear mixing together. I was standing in the middle of a storm I never saw coming, and I was being blamed for it. The person I thought was my partner had not only betrayed my trust, but was trying to make me the scapegoat. I didn't know then what the next steps would be, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The worst part wasn't just losing the money or the business. It was how alone I felt. I kept thinking, how did someone I trusted so much turn against me? How did everything I worked for come crashing down because of one person's choices? The stress was overwhelming. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. I was afraid, not just for the business, but for my future. The debt collectors didn't care about the story behind it. They only wanted their money. And worse, there was talk about bankruptcy, about legal trouble, even prison. I kept asking myself how it got this far without me realizing. The fear of losing everything, my home, my reputation, my freedom, was real. It was crushing. I felt betrayed, not just as a business owner but as a person. I had trusted Mark like a brother, and that trust was shattered. The thought that I might be blamed for something I didn't do haunted me every day. I was stuck in a nightmare, and I didn't know how to wake up. All I wanted was to fix it, to make it right, but I didn't know where to start. The road ahead looked dark and uncertain, and deep down, I feared this was only the beginning of a battle I wasn't prepared for. I knew I couldn't just sit back and let this happen. If I was going to fight, I needed proof, something solid to show what really went wrong. I started digging through every document I could find, every bank statement, every invoice, every email. It wasn't easy. I wasn't an expert, but I knew enough to see when something didn't add up. I reached out to accountants and lawyers, people who could help me understand the mess I was facing. They looked through the numbers, and slowly the picture became clearer. It wasn't just bad luck or simple mistakes. There were transactions that didn't make sense. Money moved in ways it shouldn't have been. I remember feeling a mix of relief and anger. Relief that I finally had some evidence, but anger at how far this betrayal went. It was like watching everything I built being stolen piece by piece. I wanted to believe this was a mistake, but the facts told a different story. Gathering that evidence was just the beginning. It gave me something to hold on to, a chance to prove what really happened and to fight back against the accusations that were being thrown my way. I wasn't going to let this ruin me without a fight. I had to stand up for myself and for the company I had poured my life into. Dealing with the fallout was overwhelming. Creditors kept calling, demanding payments I simply didn't have. I had to face banks, suppliers, and even employees who were worried about their jobs. It felt like the whole world was closing in on me. Every conversation was a reminder that the company I built was on the brink of collapse. Filing for bankruptcy wasn't a decision I made lightly. It was terrifying. The thought of losing everything, of starting over from zero, weighed on me every day. But it was clear that I couldn't keep running the business as it was. I had to take steps to protect myself, to stop the damage from getting worse. I hired a lawyer who helped me understand the legal side of things. There were so many documents to fill out, deadlines to meet, and questions to answer. I had to prove that I wasn't responsible for the mess, that I wasn't hiding anything. It felt like fighting an uphill battle, but I knew I couldn't give up. Every day was a struggle, balancing the pressure from creditors with the need to clear my name. The weight of it all was exhausting, but I had to stay strong. I had to fight not just for the business, but for my future. I realized then that this battle was about more than money. It was about justice, and about making sure I wasn't the one blamed for something I didn't do. Mark didn't just stay silent. He fought back. He told anyone who would listen that I was the one who messed everything up, that I was careless and dishonest. Hearing him blame me like that was a punch I didn't expect. It hurt more than losing the money or the company. It felt like he was trying to erase all the hard work I'd put in and turn me into the villain. People started questioning me, and I had to defend myself constantly. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about my reputation. I had to prove I wasn't the one responsible for the disaster. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find, every email, every bank record that showed I wasn't hiding anything. It was exhausting, but I had no choice. The accusations were painful, but I refused to let them define me. I focused on telling the truth, on showing the proof that Mark had made mistakes, and worse, that he had tried to cover them up by blaming me. It was a difficult fight, and it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about clearing my name and standing up for everything I believed in. I learned that in business, trust is fragile, and sometimes the people you think will have your back can turn and try to take everything from you. But I wasn't going down without a fight. After everything fell apart, the company was gone. The dream I'd worked so hard to build was over. Bankruptcy wasn't just a word anymore. It was my reality. I lost money, time, and a future I had planned for years. It felt like everything I cared about was slipping through my fingers. The hardest part wasn't just the financial loss. It was waking up every day knowing that people I trusted, including Mark, had turned their backs on me. I had to face family, friends, and even myself. The shame and disappointment were heavy. I wondered if I'd made the right choices, if there was something I missed, something I could have done differently. But even in the darkest moments, I started to see lessons. I learned how fragile success can be when you don't watch your back closely. I realized how important it is to understand every part of your business, even the things you don't want to deal with. Trust is vital, but it has to be earned and verified. Rebuilding seemed impossible at first. But slowly I began to pick up the pieces. I started planning again, thinking about what comes next. I wasn't going to let this defeat define me. The journey wasn't over. It was just beginning in a different way. I knew I had to be stronger, smarter, and more cautious if I wanted to make it back. Rebuilding wasn't easy. Every step felt heavy, like carrying a weight I didn't ask for. I had to start from scratch, not just with a new business idea, but with trust, confidence, and my own belief in myself. I kept thinking about all the mistakes I'd made, and the ones Mark had made, and how I could learn from both. I talked to people who had been through similar struggles, people who had lost everything and still found a way back. Their stories gave me hope. They showed me that failure isn't the end. It's just a part of the process. I realized that the pain and loss were painful, but they didn't have to define me. I began slowly, focusing on what I knew best. I started small, rebuilding relationships, setting clearer boundaries, and paying close attention to every detail. I became more involved in every part of the business, no matter how boring or complicated. This time, I wouldn't let trust blind me. I would verify everything myself. The road ahead was uncertain, but I felt ready. I was determined to build something stronger, something that could survive mistakes, betrayal, and even failure. I learned that real success isn't just about making money. It's about resilience, lessons learned, and never giving up on what you believe in. And that's the story I want to share. Looking back, I realize how much this experience changed me, not just as a business owner, but as a person. I used to believe that success meant everything was smooth and predictable. Now I know that the real test is how you handle the unexpected, the betrayal, and the setbacks. I learned to trust again, but more carefully. I learned to ask the hard questions and never take anything at face value. And most importantly, I learned that failure isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to grow from. This story isn't just about losing a business or a partner betraying me. It's about the journey of picking yourself up when everything falls apart. It's about holding on to hope, even when the future looks uncertain. And it's about finding strength in the darkest moments. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this. Trust is important, but so is vigilance. Dreams are fragile, but resilience makes them stronger. And no matter how hard the fall, you can always find a way to rise again. Now, as I look toward the future, I know I'm not the same person I was when this all began. The experience left scars, but it also gave me something I didn't have before, a deeper understanding of what it takes to build something that lasts. I know now that success isn't just about numbers or contracts. It's about trust earned every day, honesty, and being willing to face hard truths, no matter how uncomfortable. I'm cautious but hopeful. I'm rebuilding, yes, but with eyes wide open. I'm ready to take the lessons I learned the hard way and use them to create something better. This time, I'm not just building a business, I'm building a foundation strong enough to withstand the storms. I want people to know that even when everything falls apart, there's a way forward. It might be slow, it might be painful, but it's there. And sometimes, the biggest losses teach you the most important lessons. That's what I hold on to now, the belief that from the darkest moments, something new and stronger can grow. Looking back now, I realize how much that experience changed everything for me. I went from being full of hope and excitement to feeling completely broken and lost. But what I didn't expect was how much it would teach me about people, about business, and about myself. I learned that trust is something you have to protect, that sometimes the people closest to you can be the ones who hurt you the most. It wasn't just about losing money or the company. It was about losing a part of myself I thought was invincible. I had to rebuild not just my business, but my confidence, my faith in others, and most importantly, my belief in my own strength. The road wasn't easy, and there were times I wanted to give up. But somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. I want anyone listening who's going through something similar to know this. You're not alone. Betrayal and failure can feel like the end, but they don't have to be. They can be the start of something new if you're willing to fight for it. That's the lesson I carry with me every day. That no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward if you don't give up. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't the loss itself. It's learning to trust again. After what happened, I found myself doubting everyone around me. I questioned every word, every decision, every promise. It felt like a wall had gone up inside me, blocking out the hope I used to have. But I also realized that shutting people out wasn't the answer. I had to find a way to be careful, yes, but also open, to build relationships slowly, with honesty and transparency. I started to understand that trust isn't given blindly. It's earned every day through actions, not just words. Rebuilding trust took time. It meant being vulnerable in ways I hadn't been before. It meant learning to forgive myself for the mistakes I made and to forgive others for theirs. It was hard, and sometimes I wanted to go back to the safety of doubt. But I knew that if I wanted to move forward, I had to take the risk. This journey taught me that trust is fragile, but it's also one of the most powerful things we have. It can break us, but it can also heal us. And in the end, learning to trust again became one of the most important parts of rebuilding my life. Thank you for listening to my story. And if you like this kind of content, kindly like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Thank you.